Welcome, everyone, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight, man, we've got a special treat for you. Our two guests are Mark L. Lester and Jeff Miller. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. These guys are producers, directors, filmmakers from way back, and they have a new movie that is coming out tomorrow, actually, called Exorcist Vengeance, coming out to DVD and video on demand. Both you guys are executive producers in the movie. We're going to talk about that. And I have to give a little disclaimer. We have a legend in the room, Mark Lester, directed three of the most popular movies, I would argue, not only in the 80s, but of all time. He
Oh, thank
directed
you.
Class of 1984, Stephen King's Firestarter, and Commando. And Mark, not only did you produce and direct these movies, but you did them back to back to back. And that is a feat in itself. So we're going to start off. We're going to talking about Exorcist Vengeance, and then we're going to pivot over into those three classic films. So again, thank you to both of you for being on the show. Now, Jeff, Exorcist Vengeance,
Mhm.
starring Richard Bronzy, is coming out tomorrow to DVD and video on demand. Is that correct?
Robert Bronzy, yeah. It comes out tomorrow, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the major digital platforms, yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome, awesome. Now, Jeff, I got to tell you, and I still find this hard to believe, that Robert Bronzy, sorry about the mistake earlier, Robert Bronzy is not related to Charles Bronson. I mean, they're a spitting image of each other. And as I was watching the film, I'm like, I mean, what is he? His son, maybe a younger brother? And
Mhm.
when I did my research, and there is no relation whatsoever, and I'm not the only one who sees it. It's pretty viral on the internet. People trying to find some kind of familial connection, but there isn't any. So let's talk about Exorcist Vengeance. How did you first get involved with this project?
Um, I had done a few other movies with the directors, Scott Jeffrey and Rebecca Matthews. And in fact, Mark and I had executive produced a movie called The Gardener that just came out a few weeks ago. Here, Gardener, you can see
Awesome.
it.
Yeah.
um, Lionsgate put that out a few weeks ago. So those guys had directed that. They pitched me a few ideas for another movie. One of them was an Exorcist idea, so I kind of liked it, and I came up with the treatment for this. And all along, I kind of wanted Bronzy to star in it as kind of a troubled priest that has to root out a murderous demon. And so anyway, I said, Mark, you want to jump on this one, be involved again? He said, sure. So we shot it in England, about March of last year, middle of COVID and quarantine craziness and stuff. But yeah, that's how it kind of came together.
Mark, how did you get involved in this movie?
With Jeff, because we did The Gardener, it was very successful, and so he wanted to do this one. So I got involved with him in that, and no devils were hurt in the making of the film.
I saw the film, a very unique take. You have a priest, a Catholic priest, who is sort of this vigilante exorcist. He does not follow the rules of the church, but obviously he's very good at what he does because the church gives him a lot of leeway to do what he does and rid the world of evil. Now, Jeff, when it came to Robert, was that your call to get Robert as the main lead in this film?
Yeah, we I had done four other movies with Bronzy, and I call him Bronzy just because that's what he tells everybody. That's kind of his nickname, and he'll introduce himself to you as Bronzy, so I call him Bronzy. Um, I'd done four other movies, and in fact, he was the lead of The Gardener that also starred Gary Daniels. That's when Lionsgate put out. So, he's a friend of mine, um, and I just figured it was a perfect role for him. We wanted him to be this kind of, like you said, a priest that doesn't exactly follow the rules of the church. It's kind of who the church goes to for their dirty business.
Yeah.
They've got any kind of dirty, seedy business they want swept under the rug. That's who they call. So I figured he was the right guy for that. And, you know, we'd had a lot of success with The Gardener. And so I know Mark was anxious to jump aboard another Bronzy movie. And so we made it happen.
Nice. Now, Mark, throughout your career, you've done a wide spectrum of films, action, thriller, horror. You nobody can box you into being a director or a filmmaker for one particular genre. Looking back on your career, is that something that you're very proud of, that having to work the whole spectrum?
Yeah, I basically, because, when I first started, I took a class at UCLA, and it was with Howard Hawks, famous director, and he did the same thing. He directed a comedy, he directed Scarface, he directed Western. He didn't have any special movie, he just liked all films. And so I thought that's really good. If I become a director, I'd like to just shoot any genre movie because I love movies. So I'm a student of all of these genres: musical, comedy, action.
And you guys know very well in this industry, it is very easy to get boxed in. Whether if you're an actor to a particular type of character, if you're a filmmaker to making a particular type of film. So it's I think it's great when people get to work the whole spectrum and explore different genres and do what they love, which is making films. So definitely hats off and congratulations on an awesome career. Going back to Exorcist Vengeance, uh, as we go through the film, I've seen it. I got a screener. Thank you for that. Uh, there are a lot of special effects that are thrown in, and you could tell this movie's sort of like on a medium type budget. So, Jeff, if looking back when you saw the final product and looking at all the special effects to cater to the horror genre, this is a demonically possessed woman, and we find out more as the layers get peeled back as the movie progresses. Are you happy with the amount of effects that were put into the film?
Yeah, the original script was like chock full of even more effects, and it was kind of, and we ended up cutting a lot of them just out of necessity. But you know, I think we try to stick to as many practical effects as we could, but there's still some visual effects. But I thought overall they were pulled off very well, and I'm kind of happy with how it turned out. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, the like I said, as the story evolves through all three acts, more layers get peeled back about the family that the priest goes in to help. We find out that this demon that he is fighting, he knows from his past. He has seen it before. Uh, what I think is very interesting in the film is that you guys actually show us the face of what Bronzy refers to as the devil. I thought that was very fascinating to actually, instead of just have it heard, to actually see it on the screen of what he saw, whether it was the demon or the devil, he perceived it as the devil himself. So that was very interesting. And within this family structure that he goes in to help, you have a brother and a sister, and then you have their kids. Uh, what I found very interesting, the kids, they're cousins between the brother and the sister, obviously. Between the one cousin and another, there seems to be like sort of this romantic connection between them, which is sort of like a taboo in today's
Mhm.
society, but stuff happens. What did you think of that aspect of the film, and how important was that aspect to the story itself?
I mean, we touch upon that, and it is kind of a taboo subject, but I think that once you watch the whole film, it kind of makes more sense. It kind of comes together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that was something. I think the screenwriter, came up with that bit. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. It kind of, it doesn't really go there all the way, but it certainly hints at, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it hints at that in the movie. So yeah,
I like
thought it was
that.
interesting.
I like that. I like that when films push boundaries and go into what is deemed as uncomfortable areas to society.
Mhm.
So I thought, because a lot of this stuff does happen, it's a very real thing. But like you said, we're not going to give any spoilers away. As the movie progresses, we actually get to find out more. That
Mhm.
sort of explains exactly what's going on. Now, when it came to the demon itself, okay, and how you wanted that demon when the person is possessed to be portrayed, did you just leave that all up to the directors as to what their vision was, or did you have an input on that as well?
Yeah, they'd sent me different designs on what they were thinking, and we went back and forth a few times, but they finally sent that one that we ended up with. I liked it a lot, and that's what we went with. It was kind of funny during the shoot. I said, you know what this looks like? It looks like Steven Berkoff, who's in the movie. It's kind of a bald creature, bald demonic creature. I said it kind of looked like Steven Berkoff. Everybody laughed. So I hope that people don't think it's supposed to be him. It's not,
No.
but I thought it was kind of interesting that it turned out that way.
It was great to see Steven back on the screen again. For those of you that don't know, Steven is probably most famously known for Beverly Hills Cop. Uh, he played Victor Maitland, the bad guy in the film. So he's very well known for that. And it was good to see him back on the screen. He looks great and he did an awesome job in this film. So, as far as any challenges that went on with the shoot, was there any, or did this go smooth?
It was, I think, one of the biggest challenges was just getting there for the filming because we shot it in England, and this was in March of last year, and it was COVID was still COVID is still in the news, but there was we had to quarantine, so Bronzy and I had to quarantine together in an Airbnb apartment that I had booked, and so we're in quarantine for about a week and a half, trying not to drive each other crazy. And that was kind of one of the more, and we had to take all these different COVID tests. I think between the time to get there and to come back, we had to each take like 5 COVID tests.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of a nightmare with quarantine and travel and just, being limited in what you can do. So that was that was probably one of the toughest parts of the shoot. Um, I like to tell people it was kind of like, I kind of joked that it was like if you saw the movie The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, just kind of drive each other crazy at this isolated place. It's only the two of them. I was kind of joking to people. That's what it was like with Bonzi and I, just slowly going insane.
Oh man!
But
Now,
you know,
Mark, you've been doing this for 4 decades plus. Here we are. Since Jeff brought up COVID, did you ever imagine, this worldwide pandemic that doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, and all the protocols that are set up on a movie set to keep everybody safe? Having seen all the stuff that you have seen in your career, what do you think about, how COVID has affected filmmaking?
I've never seen a more challenging time to make a film with people having to test and special people, and a lot of the rules of filmmaking have changed over the years that have been just astounding to me. And a lot of them even fall in the free speech area where
Yeah,
certain kind of rules have been established to where you can't do certain things in movies that you were able to do.
yeah.
Notice there's, like, you see horror films now, there's very little nudity in any horror films,
Hmm.
very little. And
Yeah.
that's been something that's happened because of this puritanical rage that's across the country from the filmmaking community. And then you also don't see, you see very, not a lot of super controversial movies anymore. So that
That,
whole
that
side
is
of it has changed dramatically.
that's true. So let's go to the 80s, okay? Let's go back to when, you were you're making films still today. By the way, I mean, you've had such a successful career. Has it ever crossed your mind to say, you know what? I'm gonna enjoy my retirement. I'm gonna retire. Every filmmaker that I have spoken to, they've basically implied asking them to whether it is to stop acting or stop making films. It's like asking them to stop breathing. Do you feel the same way?
Yes. Yeah, I don't, it's probably some sort of sickness, but I don't see any way of stopping. It's like I'm actually going at a higher speed now because I go, I'm not going to live forever, so I've got to make as many more movies as I can. So I'm trying to get up to 100. Right now, I'm like at 75. But so we have the Jeff and I have another one coming out called Nutcracker, which is a really good horror picture that hasn't been, where you got Patrick Bergin in it, and it's shot already, and it's beautifully done.
Nice, nice. Well,
A
definitely.
Nutcracker, Christmas Nutcracker comes to life.
Wow,
So
a Christmas Nutcracker horror story. Now that's something you've never seen before.
we hope not. That's great. Yeah,
So
and then I'm shooting here in Mississippi. I'm here now shooting another movie called Hunt Club with Mickey Rourke and Mina Savari and Casper Van Dien.
you're right.
So
There's no
yeah,
slowing down. You're going full speed.
no, I'm trying to just keep going. I'm more producing than directing because it's easier to make more films. But yeah, so in terms of retiring, I mean, I was at the Cannes Film Festival once, and there was a director who made last year at Marienbad,
Hmm.
famous French director, and he showed up there at 93 with a new film. Godard had a new film at 90, so people don't stop. I don't
No,
see any way of stopping.
no.
And,
Why stop? It's your passion. So going back to the '80s, out of the three films that I mentioned in the beginning of this interview that you've done, which is Firestarter, before that came Class of 1984, and then Commando. The one that resonated with me the most back then and even today is Class of 1984. Class of 1984 is a cult classic film today. And when I saw it, you know, I was probably around 10. I was 10 years old in 1984. I know the movie came out in 1982, but I didn't see it in the theaters. I saw it when it came out on VHS, so I was somewhere around 10 years old. And I got to tell you, Mark, at 10 years old, something about that movie resonated with me. And I mean, Firestarter, fantastic movie. Commando, great movie. But there was something about Class of 1984 that just made it so special. And if you ask me what was it about it, I can't tell you. I think it was just a mixture of so many different things. Out of all those three movies, I'm gonna guess that Class of 1984 had the smallest budget out of all of those three. Is that fair to
that's
say?
correct. Yeah, that's correct. But it's my favorite movie I made because I did the writing, producing, directing. It was an idea, and it was kind of a homage to Clockwork Orange. So if you notice, but
Yeah.
the film had a power that still resonates. In the opening of the movie, it says, if we don't do something about violence in high schools, there'll be incidents all over the country in years to come. And that was years before
Oh
Columbine or
yeah.
any, there was no high school shootings yet. And this predicted all of that, and all by, in the movie, blaming, liberal policies to kids and
Yeah.
allowing weapons on campus. And so it was a very prophetic movie and very powerful. I don't know. It just happened to all work out perfectly. And it was a big hit all over the world. So,
Oh, absolutely. And
yeah.
you had this cast. Probably, I would say Roddy McDowell was maybe the biggest name in the cast, but Michael J. Fox, who was relatively unknown, is in the film. And you had a lot of other actors that were known at the time as well. So, if I were to ask you, which I'm going to, what was it, in your opinion, that made Class of 1984 so special? What would you say that was?
I'd say it was a completely original film. And it was had elements of classics like Blackboard Jungle, which kind of was very similar to in content,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just the uniqueness of the movie. And it was the first one that had punk rockers on screen. And it took like all these elements of society and mixed them up like a cocktail and threw them out like in a brand new mix that people hadn't seen. And
Exactly. And you were not afraid to take risks with that film. The rape scene of a pregnant woman, that back then, even though it was the 80s, that was,
I had no censors. This is what I'm saying. You could make something really unique because there was nobody, not one person saying, you can't do that, you can't do this. There was no intimacy coordinator on the set in the rape scene, there was
mhm.
just actors acting. And so all of these things that you couldn't even make that film today, I would be like put in movie jail. I'd be never work again if you said, "Oh, I'm going to make that." In fact, a lot of my movies, like Truck Stop Women, you could never make today.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think
that's,
that's the sad thing because, like, there were so many great directors like Russ Meyer, even Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut. He couldn't direct that movie today by himself. He'd have to have a intimacy director standing by his side.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the world has changed so much with movie making, and I've seen it over 50 years now go from like the spirit of independent filmmaking to what today it's kind of been watered down a lot of things. There's some brilliant things like Titania, that new French film,
Hmm.
and there's been
Mark,
European things.
I've always wondered what was your high school like to come up with a movie like Class of 1984.
It was miserable. I was like beaten up every day. I was called a gay, slang gay words against me, and my lunch was stolen, and there
Yeah.
was gangs, and it wasn't. I heightened everything for the movie, but yes, I had
Really?
a
There was some of that you were
bad
kind of
high
bullied
school.
in high school?
Yeah, bad high school experience.
I think almost everybody gets bullied in high school. I want to talk about the year of 1984. Like I said, I was 10 years old, but 1984, even today, seems to be some kind of a symbolic year. Wonder Woman, 1984. Okay, it's a movie. It's a year that is referenced a lot to this day. Now, I remember 1984. Like I said, I was 10. I was young, but I remember it. Nothing really spectacular happened in 1984. You had the book, of course, Big Brother, 1984, and all that, leading up to the year. But what is, in your opinion, Mark, what was it about 1984 that made it so special? Or for some people, it scared the crap out of them that 1984 was approaching.
Yes, it was basically George Orwell. I mean, that's how I got the title even from the movie, was based on that scary idea of the year 1984. I mean, now it seems almost, relatively weak. It doesn't really compare to what's going on today.
Yeah.
People look back and go, man, that was that 2020 with the worldwide pandemic.
We have
It's
gone through, I mean, the stuff that we've gone through, let's just say over the last 10 years, makes the 80s and what people thought was a very tumultuous period during the Cold War and in the 80s was not as bad as some of the stuff we've seen over the last decade in real life, uh, events around the world and whatnot. But 1984, I agree with you. It's the book, the movie, Big Brother. People were scared, and do you feel like with Class of 1984, you sort of seized on that fear that people had and brought it not to the adults, but brought it to what this up and coming generation is in school are doing and the people they are going to become when they do grow up?
Yes, I mean, what's the question exactly?
Well, did you use the fear that people had of 1984, like I said, with the book, with the movie, and the fear that the anxiety that people had with 1984? You already said you implemented it. That's why you chose the title as well. But did you want to just show, instead of adults and the year 1984, how kids in high school are dealing and how they're behaving in the year 1984 with the violence, the gangs, and the rape scene and all that other stuff?
yes, I was projecting out what the future would be like if something wasn't done in terms of this whole system that was in place even in 1982 when the film was made.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Jeff,
was
do you remember when you first saw Class of 1984?
I mean, I was a little late to the party seeing that movie because, I'd seen a lot of the movies, that Mark did in the 80s, obviously, Firestarter, Commando, but for some reason, I think Class of 1984, I think I remember seeing the poster and I was like, this looks like a punk rock kind of movie. I don't really understand what this movie is. And so I didn't see it until like many years later. Yeah.
And what
But I
was your
saw it, I was like, this
reaction?
is a great movie, wonderful movie.
Was that your initial reaction when you first saw it? Did you absolutely love it when you first saw the movie?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great movie. Yeah.
It is. Now, moving on, Mark, from Class of 1984, you were tapped to do Stephen King's Firestarter, okay? Completely different budget. I'm assuming this is a Stephen King book. Uh, you know, the cast, you have Martin Sheen, of course, Drew Barrymore. So going from Class of 1984 to directing Firestarter, which again is a Stephen King book. First question is, were you a fan of Stephen King? When is that a particular reason why you took on this project? Uh,
No, I had no knowledge. The only book I read was Firestarter at the time. So I wasn't a Stephen King fan. No, I didn't. And it was I was going to direct a movie called Year of the Dragon that De Laurentiis. I found the book and gave him this book, and I said I want to make this film. And then he all of a sudden had this Firestarter from Universal that John Carpenter was originally couldn't direct, and he never could agree on a script or a budget with Universal.
ooh,
Well, they gave it to De Laurentiis, and they said, we have $10 million is all we want to spend, but in the Carpenter budget was like 15 million. So they said, do you know who could do it? And that's when he had seen Class of '84, De Laurentiis. And I met with him and he said, yo, this is like for you, it's like 3 times your last budget. So, and so I thought, I just signed on. It was originally Year of the Dragon, but then he switched me to Firestarter and it was ready to go. It was a go movie. So I said, yes, for me, it was like a huge movie to do.
now
Yeah.
$10 million back then is probably the equivalent of $30 to $50 million today. So by no
Yeah.
means was it a small budget film. Was Firestarter your first big budget film that you directed?
Yes. Yeah.
So you agreed to direct this film. Like you said, you were not really a big fan of Stephen King. Before you started shooting, did you have any conversations with Stephen King whatsoever?
Yes. Yes. He came down to the set before shooting.
Okay,
And there
now
were
now we
various.
now we know Stephen King to date today. About 40 of his works have been adopted onto the screen,
Mhm.
titles multiple times rebooted and whatnot. Do you know Firestarter? I don't know the answer to this. Was it one of the first of his works that got made into a movie?
Yeah. They just had The Shining before and the Dead Zone.
The Dead Zone.
But they had done Carrie. I think
Carrie.
Carrie
Yeah.
had come
Carrie.
out.
It's like 3 or 4.
Salem's Lot, I think, had come out.
Really, was that before? Yeah.
Yeah, Salem's Lot
There are a
was
few.
before. That's true. Okay,
Yeah.
so knowing that you're walking in, even not being a big fan of his books at the time, did you feel any pressure that not only from the studio, but the fact that you're doing a Stephen King novel into a movie? Did the studio put pressure on you? Did you put any added pressure on yourself
No,
to?
I was scared to death, because when I read the property was there and it was so effects laden with fireballs and people on fire and I was going, oh my God, how to even make something like this with no CGI, remember, everything
No.
had to be done on the set. So the new one I saw a trailer of, the remake of Firestarter is all CGI,
Hmm.
but the one we did was all practical. And I had to just think, oh my God, if you tried to tackle the whole thing, you couldn't do it. You had to go shot by shot by shot. And there was a pressure. Universal was involved. It was a big film for me, but fortunately, I started in 1970, and this was like 12 years later. I had done all these movies, so I had a lot of experience to step up to something like that. It's not like today where somebody gets their second movie, they're doing the Eternals or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it didn't
yeah,
happen back then. You had to have like a lot of movies before you could do a studio film.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Did
again another change in the industry where people are just hired off, almost off the street sometimes, and
They
do
are,
some
yeah,
film. Yeah,
yeah. The body of work back then really mattered, and they wanted to have somebody. If they were giving millions, tens of millions of dollars to do a movie, that they had to work to back it up. Do you, was Stephen King? Did he take an active role on set, or he was not, or was he even on the set at all?
he wasn't on the set, but he was involved in the pre-production, and they had a lot of conversations about what to do when she made fire, Drew Barrymore, and then him and De Laurentiis decided, oh, we'll have this wind blow her hair. That wasn't even me. We did it, but it wasn't my idea. But later, Stephen King's, I always had a little thing with him because he said, what a stupid idea, blowing your hair. But it wasn't my idea, it was his idea. So
Uh,
I don't know.
And I tell you what, when you think about Firestarter, like I do, that when she's creating those fires, those pyrotechnics with her mind, and her hair starts to blow up in the wind, like you just mentioned. I mean, that image is like when you say Firestarter, for me, that's one of the very first images that
On the
comes to my
poster,
mind.
that's her on the poster with her hair blown.
Absolutely. Now, Drew
So
Barrymore, you said you got this film and it had a cast already attached to it. Is that what you
no,
said?
no, no one was attached. There wasn't even a script. It was just the book.
Just a
I
book.
got the script written. I had a friend named Stanley Mann. I had him write the script, and then developed the whole project. There was nothing. There was an old script that John Carpenter had, but it was discarded.
Okay, okay. Now,
Yeah,
when it came to the casting, like I said, it just had a much bigger name cast in class from 1984 did. In the case of Drew Barrymore, she had done E.T. Okay, I don't know if it had come out yet, if you have seen it. This was a very hot, you know, commodity in Hollywood, this young lady, and very sought after due to the success of E.T. Were you the one that gave the final okay to bring Drew Barrymore onto Firestarter?
I mean everybody did. We read hundreds of girls, and she was up against. In the end, it was between her and the little girl from Poltergeist.
Oh, Heather or something. I forgot the
Yeah,
last name. Yeah.
Heather O'Rourke or
Heather
something.
O'Rourke. There you go. Yeah.
it was between the two of them, and then but so the studio and everybody wanted Drew Barrymore, so she was a great choice. It's amazing
Now,
actress.
when so I assume that worked out. Everyone had to sign off with not only Drew Barrymore, like Martin Sheen, George C. Scott, and all the others in there as well.
Right? Yes.
So, what were the challenges that surprised you when you got there and you were filming Firestarter, this big budget film? Uh, was there anything, like you said, you've been working since the early 70s, now you're doing this big budget film, even having all those years of experience behind you, was there anything that surprised you working with such a big budget title?
Just the effects were challenging, like I say, to do these enormous effects, and the shooting schedule was like 60 days. I was shooting my movies in 25 days.
Hmm.
So it went on and on and on, the shooting like 15 weeks. And, it was, grueling production and a lot of dangerous stunts and effects. So it was like a huge thing to tackle. We
Did
ended
you
up,
did you find that the studio gave you autonomy over every decision you wanted to make? They let you put the
yeah,
movie out the way you saw it?
absolutely complete autonomy. I don't even think that exists today in these films. I don't think, I mean, I never even saw a studio person. It was just De Laurentiis was there, and that was it.
Today, I'm sure you know this as well, with big studio films, what's done is they do their shooting for the day, then they send the dailies up to the studio to make sure that the studio okays them. And then they do the same thing the next day. And I've spoken to a lot of filmmakers who have worked with, who do films for the big studios. And some of the big studios require what they call the dailies. Basically, whatever they shot that day gets uploaded to the studio to make sure the studio signs off on it. So back then in the 80s, that just did not exist. So,
That was 35 millimeters, so it would take days to develop, and you didn't even see it yourself. There was not even a monitor. You didn't know what the hell you were shooting.
um,
Jeff, we should do that on our next films. We want to see the dailies that night. We approve. But you couldn't do it back then. There was just like it's such a different era. It's amazing.
it
Like
is. It is.
freedom you can have even on a big budget film. The
Absolutely.
complete freedom to just to be.
Wouldn't they rush? I would think the studios, don't they rush that developing? And it's usually like they would watch them next day or something for at the studio level.
They were shipped back in 2 days. You'd see them 3 or 4 days later.
Oh, wow.
They had to sync the sound up, and it was a whole process. It wasn't like
But yeah,
digital.
because you were in North Carolina shooting the movie, right? It wasn't LA
Yeah.
or whatever. It was North Carolina. Yeah.
Now, Jeff, when did you meet Mark?
I actually met Mark in I think it was 2012. I did a movie about Paul Bunyan as a giant kind of axe murderer.
Hmm.
Paul Bunyan the lumberjack. So I had made this movie. It ended up being called Axe Giant because Sci-Fi Channel hated the title Bunyan. It was called Bunyan. Sci-Fi Channel said we hate Bunyan. We don't want Bunyan in the title. Um, but anyway, Mark was a sales agent, so I met him back then. He was very interested in the movie, and he actually came out to our premiere at Shock Fest Film Festival. So we appreciated that because most people, 90% of people will never come to your premiere or screening if you invite them. But Mark actually came out, so we always appreciated that. But he and I just kind of stayed in touch over the years, and I'd see him at markets, and I'd see him at Cannes, at the market at Cannes, and so yeah, we just I think the first one we actually teamed up on was The Gardener a couple of years
Yeah.
ago, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, class of 1984. Mark? Would you categorize that as a horror film?
Yes.
Okay, Firestarter. What genre would you place that in?
Horror film.
Horror. Okay, so now we move on to Commando. Not a horror film. Okay,
No.
you have Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this is Arnold after Terminator, after Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer. So he's a big deal now, all right? So you get Commando, and Commando, I mean, it's a pure action flick from start to finish, okay? Uh, so now you get into doing this action movie. Uh, Compared to Firestarter, is Commando's budget even bigger or about on the same scale of Firestarter?
I would say much bigger.
Much bigger. As a
Yeah, I would say
director,
bigger production.
okay, and I'm assuming that's because of all the action sequences in the film, right?
Yes. Yeah. It was shot in LA in California with a union crews and studio, 20th Century Fox. Whereas the other one, Firestarter, was non-union independent movie made by De Laurentiis in North Carolina. So this was a very costly movie, Commando in LA.
Now you said
And
you,
again, no CGI again. No
again,
CGI.
no CGI. So you said Firestarter, you did it in 60 days. How long did it take to do Commando?
Same thing.
60
45.
days.
Yeah, 50 days, 45, 50 days.
As a director, let's say you're talking to film students and let's say they want to do action films. I would think that action films are one of the most challenging films to make because of all the stunts, and all the safety precautions that need to be taken. So do you agree with that? Are action films the more intensive, harder to make films?
Yes, I would say I don't really even attempt them anymore because you need vast sums of money. And the way, like a car chase, in Commando, we actually went on Mulholland Drive and had a car chase with real cars, real drivers, real crashes. But today, I mean, you see Fast and the Furious, cars can't fly to the moon. I mean,
You see
they have
cars
cars flying to
parachuting
the
out of
moon.
airplanes.
Yeah, they're flying to the moon in a car, like in a Dodge Charger. They're flying to the moon. So the scenes can't be created anymore without vast sums of money, and you shouldn't attempt action movies like that unless you had like vast sums of money. With if they're done just all CGI with things like even Born Identity and these
Yeah.
type of car chases, you couldn't shoot those back then, that way. James Bond did it, but those were very
Oh
expensive
yeah. Yeah.
movies.
That had
Those
a
car chases, those are rudimentary. Those car chases, if you put them up against Fast and the Furious,
Now, for me,
they
Commando, the sequence that I want to talk about, and I want to ask you how you did it, is in the first part of the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is on the airplane. They're about to take off. He kills the person that's traveling with him. He makes it down into the nose gear and he jumps out of the airplane as soon as it takes off. How the hell did you shoot that?
it was a combination of a real plane that went down the runway, and there was with a giant mock-up of a plane's bottom section of a plane that was rigged to like a flatbed truck. So
Wow.
he actually climbed onto part of a plane that was a fake that was going down that same runway at LAX. And then the plane takes off, and a dummy fall. He didn't jump out of the plane.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like
I figured that.
a dummy. That's the only CGI shot in the whole movie was the animated. There was an animated dummy that comes out of the plane because
What?
we did try a real dummy, but he kept getting blown into the engines. But you couldn't get a plane like that and do stunts at LAX today. We didn't even have security then. We just called up the control tower and say, our plane's got to come around again. Can you put it in front of the other traffic so we can land it quicker? I mean,
And this is not some small town airport. This is LAX.
right, but it was operating like you couldn't even imagine it operating today like this. Couldn't even imagine.
How long did that sequence take to shoot?
Days and days. I don't even, a long time.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Now, working with Arnold, does he like to do a lot of his own stunts, or does
Yeah,
this?
he does whatever he could do. He wanted to do them all himself because he didn't believe anybody could duplicate his bodies like stunt doubles. That
Okay.
his fans would notice that the ripples weren't in the right place, whatever. However, awesome people think about this, So he was doing like a lot of this himself. Yeah,
That's
great.
impressive. Now, Jeff, are you a fan of movies, action movies like Commando?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like Commando. I saw it, when it first came out,
Now, the
and
thing about Commando, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the thing about Commando is the body count. Oh my God, especially in the third act, when he literally wipes out the entire island of mercenaries all by himself. What'd you think about that part, Jeff?
yeah, yeah. No, it's great. I mean, there's a ton of great one-liners in the movie too. So that's, I think, one of the first movies with Arnold. I guess, I mean, I guess Terminator had a lot of one-liners too, but that's, I guess, one of the first movies when he would give all these one-liners, kind of these James Bond lines after he dispatched these guys. But yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had Mark. I had the pleasure last year of meeting Vernon Wells at a convention,
Oh, I love
and
him.
what a nice man. Vernon Wells uh, plays Bennett, the antagonist in
Yeah,
Commando, and just what a down to earth, nice man. What was it like working with that entire cast in Commando?
they were great. Yeah, they were all fantastic. People
Now,
were.
compare that with Firestarter. Like I said, all the big names: George C. Scott, Martin Sheen. Was there any clashes of egos on set, or did everybody do what they had to do, true professionalism?
Oh, it was all those actors were amazing. I found that the bigger the actors are, the easier they are to work with. The more famous and bigger, the easier they are, you know?
Really?
Yeah,
I
no
guess that kind of
problem.
makes sense. They're not trying to prove something. They're already established, so they just go about and do their work. How about
Right.
you, Jeff? When you're working with different casts, uh, what types of casts do you find easier to work with?
I mean, I know what Mark's saying that, at a certain level, these people maybe don't feel like they have anything to prove. But, I feel that, a lot of these young, if you get like a young actor or somebody that, is coming in and feels very grateful to be given a chance, you usually get a lot of, they're usually, I've found, easier to work with versus somebody that has a lot of, more baggage and, the agents and managers and
Yeah,
maybe they're not even doing your project and except for the fact that you're paying them,
yeah,
a lot of money or something.
yeah,
A lot of the young actors and unknowns are kind of more grateful.
yeah.
They'll typically bend over backwards and kind of do things that sometimes you'll. But that being said, I've worked with a lot of these name actors, and they're just very nice, friendly, helpful people too. So it just kind of depends.
Absolutely. Mark, it seems that now in your career you're doing more and more horror. Would you classify yourself as a horror fan?
Oh yeah, I love horror films. I've always done, I did the Fun House with Toby Hooper I produced, and
Yeah,
I've always thrown in, I've always had horror along the way. But as I say, I like all these genres. So whatever, can be made, I'll do it. I know Jeff loves the horror shows, so Nutcracker's going to be a horror film, and yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Mark, looking back on your awesome career, is there any particular project, doesn't have to be any of the three that we got deep into, any project that you say stands out for you, whether you had a great time doing it, you got creative, you just absolutely love the experience.
I made a great little thriller called Night of the Running Man with Scott Glenn and Andrew McCarthy. That's a really interesting, good film, exciting thriller. And I did one, Extreme Justice, with Scott Glenn, Lou Diamond Phillips, about the
Yes.
police department. So those, I'm really proud of it. But I love all the films I've made. I just keep going, and they're all like little children to me.
That is so.
Sometimes I don't even remember. I can be watching TV and I see a movie. I thought, wow, that movie's pretty good. I wonder who made it. And it turns out to be me. I go, wait a minute, I actually directed it. That's what happens when you make too many films.
How about you, Jeff? Looking back on the movies that you've made, is there any one that really stands out for you?
I mean, I think my favorite of the ones I've done so far is The Russian Bride. That one came out a couple years ago. We sold it to Showtime. I think it's up on Tubi now and a lot of the streaming platforms. But it starred Corbin Burnson and the director Michael Ojeda was a very talented guy. He made a movie called Avenged,
Mm-hmm.
like a kind of a rape revenge film that Quentin Tarantino really liked. Quentin Tarantino raved about it in an interview a few months ago. The Russian Bride I like, and then these movies I'm doing with Bronzy are fun. The Gardener I enjoy. Death Kiss I think is a fun movie. Movie I did called The Toy Box with Denise Richards and Misha Barton. That's kind of a fun little haunted, about a haunted RV, kind of like Christine if Christine was an RV.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few that I have. Everybody you kind of have favorites.
So I got just one last question to Mark. What is your opinion on reboots? Like Firestarter, it's being rebooted. For me, the original Firestarter should have been left alone and untouched. What do you think about when people remake a movie that you made like Firestarter?
I mean, God bless them. It's kind of a compliment. They're going to remake your work, but there's so many that can be remade now. I mean, Nightmare Alley, but sometimes they don't come up to what the originals were. But I mean, I remade Blackboard Jungle really off the record. I mean, it was kind of a homage to it, or I mean, it's all like spinning these movies. Could be,
Absolutely.
it's good. It's good. I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I like it. They're still making Shakespeare movies, right?
actually, yeah, they are. They are. Uh, I
I
can't.
got to run, but yeah, go ahead. Yep.
No, I'm just going to say this hour, we're almost up, just flew by. I want to thank both of you for coming on here. Mark, any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Not good. Just if you're a filmmaker, just get out and shoot movies and do them your way and make them controversial and
Push the boundaries.
yes, keep filming.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, just I just tell people do something every day to move your career forward. Too many people move to LA and have to have kind of day jobs or whatever to get by. And I think if you're a writer, write. If you're a producer or director, do something every day, develop a project or send out query letters or get in touch with somebody, move your career forward.
Absolutely.
And, I just want to encourage everybody to see the new movie.
Exactly. And the movie, again, is called Exorcist Vengeance. Is being released tomorrow on DVD. Jeff, is it coming to Amazon Prime, Vudu, the major video on demand transactional platforms?
Yeah, the major TVOD, the major transactional platforms for now. And then I think, DVD should be available on Amazon as well. If not tomorrow, I think very soon. But then, the major TVOD platforms, and then, I'm sure it'll be on, Tubi and the usual suspects about 3 months from now too. So,
Excellent, excellent. So, guys, check it out. It's called Ghost Vengeance. Both Mark and Jeff are producers in the film. It's an interesting
Exorcist Vengeance.
Exorcist Vengeance. It's a great. It's a great take on demonic possession from a vigilante Catholic priest. It's something you've never seen before, and I always enjoy watching stuff that I've never seen before. I want to thank both of you. Thank Mark Lester, Jeff Miller. Thank our audience, those of you who are tuning in live, and those who will watch this later on. On behalf of Mark and Jeff and myself, stay safe. Till next time, guys, stay walking. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.